This show is sponsored by Charles Schwab. Seeking clarity in your financial journey? Schwab makes it easy for you to be an informed investor with transparent pricing, low costs, and no fee to work with a financial consultant. Schwab clearly explains their fees and helps you understand the most common costs you can incur based on recommendations from your financial consultant. Visit schwab.com or swing by one of their 400 local branches to learn more.
In the Palestinian West Bank, the last few weeks were supposed to be harvest season. What's being harvested are olives, mostly, for olive oil, to eat and make soap out of. But journalist Dalia Hatuqa says since October 7th, people have been talking about how this harvest is the most dangerous ever. Some have even been abandoning their trees.
I have a friend whose aunt and uncle were tending to their land, and they were beat up by settlers. They're, old folks. And the aunt, had her wrist broken. The uncle's head was bashed with a rock.
Oh, my gosh.
It just makes me question, humanity. I'm like, what would lead you to do that to, two old people that are just sitting there, under a tree, having a picnic or whatever, And those are the kind of stories that stay with me.
These farmers got attacked by Israeli citizens, settlers, who want to establish permanent homes here. And they're doing what they can to drive Palestinian farmers out. Violence like this has actually been going on for a long time. But according to the UN, violent assaults by Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank, they've doubled since October 7th. The Israeli military is cracking down, too. While we spoke, Dalia said she'd awoken to the news of a printing press that was raided in Ramallah, her hometown. She kept hearing about the way the IDF was rampaging through refugee camps.
So, destruction of electric poles, water, pipes, things of that nature. And people go, after the raids, they go and they try to repair things. And then the Israeli soldiers come back and they do the same thing over and over again. And it's almost like it's become okay. Things have become permissible. For example, almost on a daily basis, the Israeli military stations its vehicles right outside of Jenin Hospital, and it stops the ambulances from going in and out.
Why?
Because they can. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but sometimes it's really hard to explain these things.
Because they're suspects.
As far as they're concerned, yeah.
Dalia says, while the world's focused on the horror in Gaza, there's a slower horror unspooling where she is, as soldiers and settlers continue the grim work of separating Palestinians from their land and from each other.
More than 1,000 people have been displaced already. There's not any, for example, the Biden administration isn't being why are you building settlements right now? I mean, they've got, they're worrying about other things. So that's a scary thing.
You feel like the world is distracted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course.
Today on the show, Israel may be at war in Gaza, but the West Bank is not at peace. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Schwab. You want control of your financial future, and Schwab knows that. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it most. You can also invest on your own or trade on Thinkorswim, their powerful award-winning trading platform. Plus, you'll get low costs, transparent pricing, and 24/7 live help. Because Schwab understands it's your financial journey, and they believe you should have choices in how you invest. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity. Much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier. And it could help you save, too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, or even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Can you do me a favor and give my listeners a West Bank 101? Like Gaza, where Israel is waging war against Hamas, is a really small territory, and it's very physically separate from the West Bank. So how does it compare to where you are?
I mean, a lot of people, even politicians, they refer to the West Bank as a kind of Swiss cheese. When the Oslo Accords were signed between the PLO and Israel, they divided the West Bank into three administrative zones. There's Area A, where the Palestinian Authority, it's an entity. It administers civil and security matters. And that's where Ramallah, for example, is. Area B is where the PA administers only civil matters, so Israel is in charge of security issues. And Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank, this is where Israel maintains full control. It includes all Israeli settlements and 2/3 of the West Bank's fertile, agricultural land.
So if you want to farm sheep or grow olives, you're going to want to be in Area C, and that's where the Israeli military is in charge.
Yeah, exactly. And so while Area C is a continuous territory, Areas A and B are fragmented into 166 separate enclaves.
Can you give me a baseline of what life was like in the West Bank, especially for people in Area C, the area controlled by the Israeli military, before October 7th? Like in the last year or so, what was it like to live in those areas?
Yeah, so these areas, especially people in Area C, life has always been hard for them because they are ultimately surrounded by settlements. For example, if we look at, let's say, October, November of every year, that's when the olive harvest takes place. And constantly, people are either not allowed to access their land by the Israeli military to harvest their crops, or when they do harvest their crops and they go away for the night or whatever, their crops are then stolen by Israeli settlers. And not only the crops, you've got the theft of equipment like tractors, ladders, things of that nature, like tools. And for people who have nothing except the land, you're taking away, the only means to feed their families.
That seems like on its face awful and punishable. Like, why isn't it?
Because Israel doesn't want to punish them. Ultimately, the Israeli government is supporting the settlers. This is a settlement plan. This is a plan to get rid of Palestinians from the land and make way for Israelis.
What are the settlements like? Do the settlers have the same struggles as the Palestinians who are living in Area C?
Settlements are actually a little bit like the places where your old uncle goes to retire in Florida. These really nice houses with red roofs, and you can see them from afar because they're always at the top. That's the whole point, is that you build settlements at the top, and then Palestinians are at the bottom of the valley.
And are some of these settlements legal and some of them not?
That is a distinction that the Israeli government has created because under international law, all settlements are illegal. there are 500,000, so 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and that's a lot of people. And for the Israeli authorities, there is a distinction between quote unquote legal settlements, and these are the ones that are given power and electricity and water and education and things of that nature. And then there's the rogue outposts, so to speak, that are randomly set up by a settler and a couple of his friends who puts a caravan on some Palestinian man's private land and then decides that ultimately it's his land.
And for Palestinians, there's another problem. If a settler attacks you, what's your recourse? Who are you going to call?
There's nothing they can do. They can't help themselves. There's nobody to help them because, I mean, nearly half of all attacks, like the UN statistics say, Israeli forces are either accompanying or actively supporting the attackers. And there's no legal manner in which to kind of fight back. So, for example, when there are cases filed against settlers for attacks on Palestinians, fewer than 10% result in an indictment, and only 3% result in a conviction. And this is data that we've seen or that's been gathered by Israeli rights groups in the last 18 years.
We'll be right back after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
There's a big difference between talking and reporting, especially right now with a fire hose worth of news coming your way. You know what helps? Having reporters in the field. I'm Brad Milkey from ABC News, and that's what we've got on ABC's daily podcast, Start Here. Every morning, Start Here takes you across the country and around the world for a quick, smart look at the stories that matter. It's fast, it's straightforward, and sometimes, gasp, news can even be fun. So let's meet up tomorrow morning. Listen to Start Here wherever you get your podcasts.
'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
I'm trying to understand what would cause a Jewish settler to inflict harm on a Palestinian community, drive people out. What do these settlers believe if we ask them? Why?
Honestly, it would be great to have an actual settler speak because I don't feel very comfortable speaking on their behalf. But my understanding is that a lot of these settlers believe this land was historically their ancestral land. And so they will do whatever it takes to get it back. I mean, that's something that I would say I appreciate about, Israeli settlers, is that they're very much, what's the right word? They're very vocal about what they want and how they're going to get it. And there's no lying, They're just there and they say this land was given to us by God for some people. I mean, those are, a certain population of the, Israeli settlers. And we're going to take back what's ours. And then, of course, there are Israeli settlers who are there for economic purposes because the Israeli government provides them with housing and education and a place to live. And, you know, it's a good life. But what causes people to actually inflict harm on other people? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, because the kind of aggression that we see from settlers is really scary. So much so that even when we're driving, we always try to drive kind of away from settlements because there might be a settler there, either with a gun or, if you're lucky, with a stone.
You literally avoid them? You literally, take the long way?
Yeah, you take all kinds of ways. You take hours upon hours. But that's the thing, is that, like I said, there's 500,000 settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So it's not like it's an easy task.
But Dalia says there's also this sense that more settlements in the West Bank, it's not just good for Israeli settlers.
I think a lot of settlers who live in the West Bank say the construction of settlements ultimately improves the security of Israel. This is something that I read in Pew, the Pew Research Center. And the argument is that settlements act as a buffer for Israel's national security. So as they restrict the movement of Palestinians and undermine the viability of a Palestinian state.
My guess is you see it very differently.
I might be different than anybody else, but for me, I don't see a way out of this except sharing the land. There's nowhere for anybody to go. You can't, force 500,000 Israelis out of settlements anymore. It's just not feasible. And at the same time, you can't displace Palestinians. They're not going to go to Jordan. Jordan doesn't want that, and neither do Palestinians. This is, and you can't displace Palestinians in Gaza to Egypt either. And so ultimately, we're stuck together. And a lot of people don't want to hear that.
About a week ago, President Biden said he was going to punish settlers who were involved with West Bank violence. He was going to impose a visa ban so people can't come to the U.S. or stay here. What did you make of a step like that?
Honestly, I'm rolling my eyes as I'm speaking to you because, first of all, most of these settlers, a lot of them are Americans. He can't deny them access to America.
They don't need a visa.
No, they're American citizens. Not only that, but also, how do you determine who's an extremist and who's not? Ultimately, being a settler or being on a settlement, the settlement itself is illegal. So what degree, what do you have to do to be determined for the U.S. government to determine that you are violent enough not to get a visa? And not to get a visa, what is that? A slap on the hand? And also, there is the situation on the ground in the West Bank that could implode at any point in the near future. So there's a lot of instability here. And I think the Americans have a lot of leverage, and they're not using it like they should.
If you had to guess, if I called you up in a month or two, do you think your day-to-day life will have changed for the better? Do you think you'll feel more secure?
I'm not sure how to answer that because, there is what I like to call a baseline.
You expect violence or inequality.
Exactly. And it's here because these things didn't just happen after October 7th. These things existed long before October 7th. Now we're seeing them under the microscope, but we've been through this. We've been through this for a long time. And that's why I'm not very hopeful that, if you call me in 2 months, I'll be like, yeah, they killed this many people the other day, and there were these settler attacks. And we're going to talk about pretty much the same things, but the numbers are going to be different.
Do you ever think about leaving?
No. I like it here. I know that's insane. No, I don't, because I don't know why, honestly. I mean, I do divide my time between here and Jordan, and I spend my summers in Chicago and DC. So, yeah, I mean, I move around quite a bit. And that makes me one of the more privileged people, so to speak. But honestly, everywhere I go, my heart is here, and it's my home. And I don't see why I would or should leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole thing right there. That's the whole thing. Dalia Hatuqa, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Dalia Hatuqa is an independent journalist. She lives in Ramallah. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osborne, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
I'm Dalia Lithwick, and I'm host of Amicus, Slate's podcast about the law and the U.S. Supreme Court. We are shifting into high gear, coming at you weekly with the context you need to understand the rapidly changing legal landscape. The many trials of Donald J. Trump, judicial ethics, arguments and opinions at SCOTUS. We are tackling the big legal news with clarity and insight every single week. New Amicus episodes every Saturday, wherever you listen.